The auction hall on Verith Station smelled like machine oil and wet metal. It was a large open room carved out of the rock of a dead moon, with hanging lights that buzzed and flickered. Dozens of aliens pushed against each other near the front, all trying to see what was being sold. Cal Durham stood near the back, his arms folded, watching. He was a human mechanic, 34 years old, with rough hands and quiet eyes. He had come to Verith Station 6 weeks ago looking for work. Nobody had hired him. The aliens on the station did not trust human engineers. They thought humans were too new, too small, too simple to understand the machines that kept the galaxy moving. Cal did not argue with them. He just kept showing up. The auctioneer was a Torati, a 6-armed creature with a voice like gravel rolling down a pipe. It called out lot numbers and waved 2 of its arms while the other 4 held a ledger, a price board, a drink, and something that looked like a small fan. Then the doors at the back of the hall opened. 2 station workers pushed a wide cart through the crowd. On the cart lay a dragon. She was albino, white as old bone, with scales that had lost their shine. Her left wing was folded at a wrong angle, the membrane crumpled like a piece of paper that had been crushed and then partly smoothed out again. One of her eyes was clouded over. She was breathing, but just barely. A small tag on the cart said, Lot 74. Crippled specimen. No medical value. Transfer only. The crowd laughed. Not all of them, but enough. A few made comments in their own languages. The Torati auctioneer said something in 3 different languages, and the laughter got louder. Cal's partner, Pete Okafor, was standing next to him and quietly suggested they look at the engine parts on the other side of the hall instead. Cal did not move. He looked at the dragon. She turned her good eye slowly in his direction. It was a deep gold color, like sunlight through old glass. She did not look afraid. She looked tired in the way that things get tired when they have been told too many times that they are finished. Cal stepped forward and raised his hand. The laughter in the room got quieter, then stranger, then louder again when people realized he was serious. The Torati auctioneer asked him twice if he was certain. Cal said yes both times. He handed over the last 2 months of his savings without blinking. Pete put his hand over his face. Outside in the corridor, while they wheeled the cart toward the maintenance bay Cal had rented on the lower level, Pete asked him what exactly he thought he was doing. Cal was quiet for a moment. Then he said she was not done yet. Pete said that was not an answer. Cal said it was the only one he had. The doors to the bay closed behind them. Down the corridor, the laughter from the auction hall still echoed off the walls. Cal pulled up a stool, opened his notebook, and got to work. The diagnosis nobody wanted to hear. Cal spent 3 days without proper sleep. He did not make a big deal of this. He just worked through the nights with a lamp hooked to the wall above him and his notebook open across his knee. He measured everything. He measured the dragon's wingspan, the angle of the collapsed membrane, the thickness of the scale layers along her spine. He sketched diagrams in pencil, careful and slow, the way his father had taught him to map out an engine before touching a single bolt. His father had worked on old trucks back in Kentucky. The principle was the same: understand the shape of the problem before you try to fix it. The dragon watched him. She had stopped flinching when he moved close. She still did not make any sound. On the 3rd day, Cal sent a message to the station's senior xenobiologist, a being named Dr. Voss, asking for a consultation. Voss arrived the next morning, looked at Cal's notes for a long time without speaking, and then told him the truth. The fire gland was the main problem. It sat deep inside the dragon's chest, a small organ about the size of a closed fist. It was blocked by scar tissue, hard and calcified, built up over years of improper treatment. The previous medics had sealed the gland completely because they thought it was the only safe option. This had caused a secondary infection inside the surrounding cavity. Voss said no machine on the station could navigate the interior safely. The cavity was too irregular, the angles too tight. The medical tools available simply could not work in that space without causing more damage. Cal asked what the tools could not handle specifically. Voss told him the clearance needed was about the width of 2 human fingers working together. There was a silence. Voss heard what he had just said. Cal rolled up his sleeves. Voss told him he could be burned from the inside if the gland discharged unexpectedly. Cal said he had worked inside active ship engine cores before and that he understood the risk. Voss had no answer for that. He stayed anyway. A young Torati apprentice named Nira had been watching from the bay doorway since that morning. She had meant to walk past and had not walked past. She stood very still with her 4 hands folded and watched Cal pin his sketched diagrams to the wall and begin laying out his tools in a neat row on a clean cloth. She had never seen anyone work quite like this. The wing restoration was a separate problem. Cal determined the membrane was not dead. It had simply been starved of the fluid that normally kept it soft and flexible. He needed a specific compound to begin rebuilding it, and that compound was not sold anywhere on Verith Station because no one believed membrane restoration was possible at this stage of damage. He cummed Pete. Pete said he knew someone 2 docks over who might have it. Cal picked up his notebook and jacket. Pete looked at the ceiling for a moment and then followed him out into the lower corridors of the station. The trader's name was Dex Monroe, and he operated out of a storage room on dock level 4 that smelled like chemical solvents and old coffee. He was a heavy-set man with a short beard and the cautious eyes of someone who had been in trouble before and did not intend to go back. He had the membrane compound in a cold storage crate in the back. He named a price that was twice what Cal could afford and then crossed his arms and waited. Cal looked at the crate. Then he took off the toolkit he wore on his belt, the one he had carried for 15 years, the one his father had given him before he left Earth. He set it on Dex's table without a word. Pete did not say anything. He knew what that kit meant. Dex looked at it for a moment and then slid the crate forward. Back in the bay, Cal prepared for the fire gland procedure. Nira arrived at the door and asked if she could observe. Cal told her she could stay if she held the lamp steady. She stepped inside and took the lamp in 2 of her hands and held it without moving. The procedure took 11 hours. Cal worked with his hands inside the dragon's chest cavity, guided by the diagrams pinned to the wall and by what he could feel under his fingers. It was careful, slow, precise work. He did not rush. The scar tissue came away in small pieces when he found the right angles. Sova, the dragon, stayed mostly still. She seemed to understand something was being done for her rather than to her. At the 6th hour, Commander Vorith arrived at the bay door with 2 enforcement officers. Someone on the station had filed a complaint about unauthorized biological work on a sapient creature. Vorith was tall and wore the station's gray uniform with the stiffness of someone who liked rules more than people. He told Cal to stop immediately and said the dragon would be taken to station custody. Lena Hargrove, the human liaison officer, appeared in the corridor behind Vorith at almost exactly that moment. She had not been called. She had heard about the complaint from a contact and had come without fully deciding what she was going to do. She looked at the room. She looked at Nira holding the lamp perfectly still with 2 hands. She looked at Cal, who had not moved or looked up. She looked at Sova. Then she told Vorith in a clear, calm voice that she was observing a licensed human cultural practice classified as triage repair, and that the station regulations he was citing did not apply to a human mechanics bay under Treaty Amendment 7C. Vorith asked her to show him that amendment. Lena said she would forward it to him first thing in the morning. Vorith left. He did not look entirely convinced, but he left. Lena sat down on a crate near the door and stayed for the rest of the procedure without speaking. At hour 11, Cal finished. He cleaned his hands slowly. There was a long quiet moment. Then Sova exhaled. A thin, clean line of fire came out of her mouth, pale orange and steady. It lasted about 3 seconds. It was the first flame she had produced in years. Nira made a sound in her own language that meant, roughly, that she had been wrong about something important and was no longer wrong about it. Cal picked up his pencil and made a note in his book. The wing took longer. Cal had expected this. He began treatment sessions the next morning. Every day he applied the membrane compound along the collapsed sections of Sova's left wing and adjusted the scaffold brace he had built from salvaged station materials. The brace was not pretty. It was made from cargo struts, medical-grade wire, and a type of flexible tubing that was normally used in water filtration systems. It held the wing at the correct angle and put gentle pressure in the right places so the membrane could begin to grow back along the frame he had given it. Word got around the station. Aliens began stopping near the bay window to watch. Not the way they had watched at the auction, not to laugh. They stood quietly and looked through the glass. Some stayed for a few minutes. Some stayed longer. Cal never noticed because he was always bent over his work. Nira came every day now and did not need to be invited. She started keeping her own notebook. She copied Cal's diagrams and wrote her own observations beside them. One afternoon she told Cal that among her people, there was a belief that a dragon past a certain point of damage could not be restored, and that trying to restore one was considered an insult to the creature's dignity, a refusal to accept the natural end of things. Cal listened to all of this carefully. Then he asked what Sova thought about it. Nira did not have an answer. She went and sat beside Sova for a long time. Sova put her great white head into Nira's lap and closed her good eye. Pete Okafor, meanwhile, had managed to get Cal a short-term repair contract from a cargo shipping company that had heard about the dragon work and was curious about the human mechanic who worked with his hands and a pencil. It was the first money Cal had made in months. He used all of it to buy proper medical-grade equipment instead of the improvised tools he had been using. The improvement was steady but slow. 3 weeks of daily work. Each day the readings showed a little more growth in the membrane, a little more flexibility returning to the frame. Cal tracked every measurement in the notebook. Then, on the 22nd day, Sova had a bad hour. She became agitated in the late afternoon and thrashed suddenly. The brace came apart at one joint. Part of the membrane tore slightly where it had just begun to knit. Cal was knocked across the bay and hit the back wall hard enough that Pete, who was watching from the door, came running in. Cal stood up. He checked Sova first. She was not in pain, just frightened and ashamed in the way animals get ashamed when they feel they have done something wrong. He put a hand on her neck and stayed there until she settled. Then he rebuilt the brace joint and kept going. Lena, watching from the doorway, filed a report that described the incident as routine structural adjustment during ongoing restoration work. She was not entirely sure why she wrote it that way. She did it anyway. On the 31st day, Cal removed the brace for the first time. Sova extended the wing. Not fully, not yet. But the shape of it was clear and real. The membrane stretched out in the light of the bay like something that had been waiting a long time to be seen. Nira made the sound in her language that meant she had been changed by something. She did not try to hide it. Cal looked at the wing for a moment. Then he wrote 2 more weeks in the notebook. The day came on a quiet morning. Cal had said nothing to anyone. Pete found out the night before when Cal asked him to be at the outer platform by early shift. Pete showed up with 2 cups of coffee and said nothing else. Nira arrived just after them, her notebook under one of her arms. Dr. Voss came because Nira had told him. Lena Hargrove came because she had been watching the whole thing from the start and was not about to miss the end of it. By the time the light on the station shifted from night cycle to day cycle, there were about 40 people gathered on the outer platform, a wide cargo deck open to the station's exterior field. Species from a dozen different worlds stood in quiet groups along the edges. Nobody had officially announced anything. People had simply heard. The bay doors opened. Sova walked out on her own. She was still albino. Still blind in one eye. The scars from her old injuries ran across her neck and along the base of her wings. She was not a new dragon. She was the same dragon she had always been, the one the auction hall had laughed at, the one with the tag that said no medical value. She was just repaired. She walked to the center of the platform and stopped. She spread both wings. Full extension. The left wing opened as wide as the right, the membrane catching the recycled light of the station and holding it, pale and clean as paper held up to a window. It held the way something holds when it has been built correctly and given time to become what it was supposed to be. Sova looked out at the open field beyond the station shield. Then she jumped. The first 2 wing beats were loud and clumsy, more force than grace. The third was quieter. By the 5th, she was over the edge of the platform and banking in a wide slow arc through the open space beyond the shield membrane, her gold eye catching the light of distant stars. She flew without hurry. She flew like she had remembered something. Nobody laughed. Commander Vorath stood near the back of the crowd. He watched for a long time. Then he turned and walked back inside without speaking. Nira watched him go and understood something about power that she had not understood before. Dr. Voss asked Cal how he had known the membrane could still be saved. Cal said he had not known for certain. He said he just knew it was not dead yet, and that there was a difference between those 2 things. Voss wrote that down in his own notes. Pete told Cal he was the most stubbornly hopeful person in the known galaxy. Cal said his dad used to say there was no such thing as unfixable, only unfinished. Pete said that sounded like something printed on a coffee mug. Cal said it probably was. Sova landed back on the platform after about 20 minutes. She lowered her head to Cal's chest and rested it there, not in submission but in the way that living things acknowledge each other when words are not enough and do not need to be. The crowd was quiet. A few made gestures in their own customs that meant, in their various languages, something close to, "We saw that, and it mattered." The Torati auctioneer, who had made jokes in 3 languages, sent Cal a message that evening. It contained only his name and a formal request for a consultation. Cal read it twice. He put his notebook in his jacket pocket. He told Pete they were probably going to need a bigger bay. Pete finished his coffee and said he would start looking in the morning. Cal was already writing in the notebook.